Oh, hey, I didn't see you staring at me as I do what I usually do. Sit in a nebulous office space staring at a blank computer monitor because the editor is too lazy to insert any relevant footage onto it. Thanks. I haven't moved since my last look at an isekai, which was the final nail in this series. Or so I thought. That was until I realized how much isekai there was out there, and talking about its economic and cultural impact is pretty damn easy and lucrative for a piece of trash such as I mean, I'm greatly interested in this genre, so follow me as I pick yet another scab on the anime medium to look at isekai as a concept, uncovering trends, history, and probably pick up a few diseases by trudging through this godforsaken swamp of entertainment. And today's series certainly made a splash when it aired, by exemplifying one of the weirdest and most endearing traits isekai has developed in recent years. That being the thematic quirk to not just define the character, but the plot itself. Typically, the shorter the word, the better. And that's right, we're looking at the widely popular Tate no Yusha no Nariagari, or for my less Japanese-inclined viewers, the rising of the shield hero today in an effort to decide where exactly it fits into isekai as a genre. I'm pretty sure you all know the song and dance by now. Starting as a web novel way back in 2012 on the ever-popular Shousetsuka ni Naro, Shield Hero took a dark fantasy approach when adapting the isekai formula. That'd put it in the same vein as Re:Zero, though I'd argue that series is more dark because of its gratuitous death scenes rather than the setting itself being dark. The series ran there self-published until 2015, despite getting a light novel adaptation in 2013 by Media Factory, a subsidiary of Kadokawa, coincidentally the same company that picked up Re:Zero. I'm sure the coincidence ends there. The following year, in 2014, the franchise found itself nabbing a manga adaptation, and it was poised to be the next isekai darling to storm the world. That was until, for no explicable reason, an anime adaptation of this series just didn't come about for a long while, taking 5 years to finally get one out the door from the manga's launch. For reference, since the comparison based on genre and publisher is apt, Re:Zero only took about 2 years total from its light novel debut to get an anime adaptation. And that's with the series only selling about 1 million copies to that point, while Shield Hero had around 3 million in circulation in 2018, spiking to over 6 million after the anime's first core released. That's a crazy explosion in growth, and part of why getting an anime made for even a slightly popular series is essential to financial success for many involved. Though implying there was absolutely no interest in an anime is absurd, as production started sometime before June 2017 when the studio announced it was working on one. Does that speak to quality? Or do we assume the studio wanted to take its time? Studio size certainly factors in too. And if this did get an anime in 2016 when its contemporaries got theirs, it most likely would have been swallowed in the isekai tide, competing with Overlord, Re:Zero, and Konosuba. Maybe lost to time as people would have overlooked it entirely. But that's just pontificating on alternate history at this point. Alright, so Rising of the Shield Hero. You know what that means. An isekai, obviously. So dude, another world, saving the place? That's a given at this point, as that's part of the genre definition. But is it a summon, reincarnated, or mind insertion plot? Rest assured, it's summoning, by sheer happenstance, as it's via a book placed in a library. So lucky for the summoners, their legendary hero happened to be into renting books when his funds ran low. Once there, he finds out he's with 3 other dudes from alternate versions of Japan, all pretty familiar with the setting, while he isn't. What we do see is that our protagonist is yet another one of those otaku types who's otaku in name only practically, as we see him with a dirty room, with a computer, and some manga. That's about it. I don't really see the appeal of that cliche by this point, as it's blatantly there to allow audience identification with the protagonist. For me, that's lazy writing, since it's easy to say he's an otaku for the audience to latch onto him, rather than show any actual character traits that might be divisive among its core demographic. If you want to say he gets those character traits later on, and spoiler, he does, it leads me to ask why include the otaku thing at all since it's just lip service. I'm sure that comes off as needlessly nitpicking, but if I'm anything, it's pedantic. So we have our nerdy otaku whisked off to another world for an adventure, with game-like mechanics as he legit has a stat screen that shows his level and power of his weapon, the titular shield, and tutorials on how his shield levels up. I'm so glad the video gamey vibe stuck around, that really sells an isekai for me. There's also magic, a medieval setting, adventurers, and every other trope you'd expect from an isekai, which shows a strict adherence to the formula. Even a harem given enough time. And the reason he's adventuring is to fend off a world-ending crisis. Being a legendary hero from the start and trying to save the world, that meets my criteria of making the world revolve around him since he's literally a living legend. Though LAKEY genuinely tries to earn that. It nails all the major tropes of modern isekai, as disappointing as that might be. So where did this revolutionize, or at least try to stand out from other series? Shield Hero is damn popular. One of the more popular isekais in 2019, consistently selling about 1,700 Blu-rays on release weeks, falling short of Tensura but ahead of Ascendance of a Bookworm. Light novel sales of this series have skyrocketed too since the anime's airing, showing there's a hungry audience. And said audience is drawn in by this series trying to be different in key aspects. Following a formula might make it look cookie cutter on the surface, and I purposely present shows in this video series like that in the last section so I can highlight what they do differently that makes them stand out in this one. So popular for what reason in Shield Hero's case? Well, the series starts off rather typical and hits hard with subversion early on by showing the hero starting off high. He's summoned, treated well at first, if a bit ignored, and the series lightly pokes at him for being inept and no one wants to be by his side. So it frames that as he needs to build a team like any other isekai protagonist would. The girl by his side is set up to be his companion through the journey, one who will most likely be his love interest. However, that falls apart when she's revealed to be absolutely awful and lies about sexual assault to get him disgraced and lose what little he has. Which leads into the dark fantasy aspect. The show isn't so much bloody, but actually has some legitimately dark themes of injustice, and at times wallows in the more unsavory elements of its story like sexual assault and slavery, specifically buying a girl to be in his party. But listen, not many isekais tackle those, which generate word of mouth and the need-to-know instinct kicks in. People check it out, end up sticking around, and even liking the show at later points. Or they're just edgelords like me. Though, don't get me wrong, there's definitely some weird glorification of slavery in this one. There's a growing trend in isekai that's drawn my attention, and that's the gimmick becoming much more prevalent, like invading the title. It could be argued Re:Zero had the same thing, but in recent years, I'm finding more and more shows putting their one defining trait front and center, and that seems to be enough to sell the entire series. Rising of the Shield Hero, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, Cautious Hero, the hero is overpowered but overly cautious, Reincarnated as a Sword, Reborn as a Vending Machine, Now I Wander the Dungeon, My Next Life is a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom. And I wish I was making some of these up. That'd be a lot more rich, but I expect to see a few of these as anime in the coming years. So Shield Hero takes the idea of a guy who can only use shields and runs with it, throwing in a few twists along the way to make it less one note than it easily could have been. While it'd be just as easy to knock the franchise for this, say lacks imagination and laugh my way to the bank while shitting out a snarky video about, oh, so the Shield Hero uses shields? Who would have seen that coming? But weirdly, these have been some of the better isekai franchises to date, in terms of sales, popularity, and, strangely enough, enjoyability. Because the show is so upfront with its gimmick, it gets it out of the way so we can move on to exploring what the series is actually trying to say. So for once, I found some streamlining in isekai I can actually get behind. If I had to say what Shield Hero brought to isekai, I wouldn't say it's much. It's more that it took existing ideas that were already around and applied its own spin to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. It makes a perfectly serviceable anime, and one people seemingly enjoy. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks like voting on what I do next. Thanks for watching.